Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here, and today I actually want to talk about Mike Lindell's Cybersymposium. That's right, it went on for the last few days from the 10th to the 12th, and minus about 4 hours of it that I caught up with later thanks to my actual day job and meetings and all of that. I watched or listened to it, depending on the moment, to the entire thing from start to finish. Now, I also live tweeted about this throughout the entire thing, so feel free to check that out because there's a lot more information in terms of the minutia of each day as to what I thought when I saw things or listened to things. A lot of this was discussion. Also, I was afraid I was going to miss quite a bit of this, to be fair, as Mr. Lindell stated at the beginning that it would be like a nonstop 72-hour, telethon type thing, and quite frankly, I actually need my beauty sleep. I mean, it's tough keeping this up. Now, fortunately, the event broke each evening around 9 p.m. and picked up around 9 a.m. the next day, so I was able to get my sleep, as was everybody else, and I assume Mr. Lindell as well. Now, before I dive into the core of my assessment, which honestly is not going to be as long as you think, and I will explain that in a moment, I wanted to lay down some ground rules here for my analysis, basically to make sure that we are doing this properly. And this is something that I do typically when I'm analyzing something, is I set up the ground rules or the parameters for my analysis. Now, the first thing that I want to say is that I am not analyzing the politics of the event or the people there. A good chunk of this event obviously talked politics. That is not my focus at all. I do not care if you are watching or listening to this. I don't care what your politics are. I was watching as a cybersecurity expert and nothing more, which brings us to point number 2. This video and podcast is focused on the cybersecurity information and evidence, and basically, and also how any cybersecurity professional would approach and validate the evidence before they start analyzing. This will not cover the discussions of claims of people that their local or state auditors did X to cover things up, or anything and everything in between. I'm a cybersecurity person, and so I am sticking to cybersecurity items. That's it. That's it. And please, for the record, don't send me, "You suck, Nick. Trump is the rightful president and Lindell is amazing," or "You suck, Nick. Trump is awful and Lindell is horrible" messages. I'm not going to respond to this. Again, I am focused on the evidence. I am focused on the data. Basically, I am keeping this only to the evidence that is presented, or rather was presented during this conference. If my analysis agrees or disagrees with your political beliefs, that's fine by me. That is not my intent. Now, that brings me basically to my final point. I am approaching this as if I were personally going to be called as an expert witness for a trial and had to prove or disprove evidence and why I think that evidence is real or not. That's it. That's all I am doing here. That's the only thing that my focus has really been on, and I think you will see that in my tweets if you go back starting on the 10th in the morning and read the whole thing. And believe me, there was probably a couple hundred tweets that I did. So with that, let's begin with a rather basic premise before we get to day 1. And this is going to be a theme throughout my analysis here. And the question that I am going to be starting with is, how do we know evidence is legitimate? Now, at its core, lawyers and judges understand that evidence can be fabricated against someone or some entity. So it's important to understand that the evidence that shows up in court to accuse or defend someone or something is actually real and not fabricated or tampered with. For a forensic investigation, that actually starts with something known as the chain of custody. Basically, and in plain English, and please, chain of custody nerds and cyber nerds, this is, again, plain English because a lot of my followers are not in our field. The chain of custody is basically the understanding of where the evidence came from, who has handled it, and how it has been maintained, and the integrity of that has been maintained, meaning nobody altered or tampered with it for any reason because the chain of custody is very clear. So, as an example, and this is true, I was called into a case by attorneys to forensically examine an iPhone and also recover what were believed to be incriminating text messages that one of the parties had deleted. So we first verified that the iPhone actually belonged to the person in question. We then made a forensic image of the phone, which is essentially a duplicate of the phone that cannot be altered. This image was verified as it was made by not only me, but the two parties basically opposite sides of the table witness this with me. They witnessed me duplicate the iPhone. That basically ensures the fairness. And then I recovered the deleted text messages, again, verified by each party who received a copy of the information that I did in front of them. I then stored all of this data as a third party securely and logged into an encrypted container, meaning if you needed access to the data, it would essentially be logged. I am a third party representative in that case. That way, if either one of those tries to tamper with something, I can be the backup to say this is actually what happened. Now, during this entire process, there would be no way for me to alter or tamper with the data to support one side or the other, as each side witnessed me perform this task and received duplicate copies that I, as a third party, as I mentioned, stored for reference. That holds up in court. Now, if I did this work alone, for example, at the behest of only one of these parties, then what's the end result then if the data favors the party that hired me to do the work? I get accused, as does that party, of basically tampering or fabricating evidence against that party. This is why we do these things in a very transparent manner. Now, in the case of something like a voting machine, that forensic image would also have to be done by a third party with witnesses on both sides to basically be fully understood that it is legit and tampered free. Now, prior to that forensic image being taken, there would also need to be a chain of custody for the machine itself. Who owns it? Where is it stored? Can it be accessed in private without any kind of logging? Meaning, can somebody walk in and do something to that and nobody can tell that that's happened? Can it be tampered with in the same way? If we don't have a clear understanding of this, then the evidence is suspect. And when we do have evidence like this, we forensically go in and attempt to verify that it is in fact legitimate, that there are specific markers or points that can line up. So in this case, if we've got that, it could have been fabricated, it could have been planted, it could have been altered, or it could have been legitimate. But without the actual chain of custody, any one of those could be true. Basically, it could be real or not. So with that, let's go to the first day. And much of this is taken from my tweeting, which, obviously I was doing constantly. So if I'm flubbing on stuff, it's because I screwed up a word in a tweet. Now, first, excuse me. I want to say I have spoken at or attended hundreds of cybersecurity and tech conferences in my lifetime. I am old. Now, this was unlike any one that I have seen, in that the majority of the time wasn't actually talking about technology, or the evidence of fraud and all of that. Basically, they were talking about other things. Much of this was various topics of a political nature. That's also why this analysis is going to be shorter than I think you and I expected when you probably clicked on this video or audio. Now, sticking to the evidence of day one, Mr. Lindell and various other speakers basically spoke of Mr. Lindell having what are known as PCAP files taken from voting machines that prove that those voting machines were communicating to the Chinese government. This is what was stated on stage. Now, I was anxiously waiting for them to release this data because I know what a PCAP file is. I wanted to review this in depth. Now, once again, in plain English, and please, haters to the left, other cybersecurity experts, we're talking plain English here. Basically, PCAP files are files that show the packet capture from network traffic as one device or computer communicates to another device or computer, or goes out to the internet and comes on back. So basically what it looks like is, okay, the address of this computer is talking to the address of this computer. Basically, what's the protocol? How much was sent? It gives you that listing for an entire network or from one place to another. That's kind of what a PCAP file is packet capture, PCAP. So while a PCAP file isn't going to show us exactly how a voting machine is programmed to cheat an election, it would show us if the voting machine was phoning home somewhere on the internet and if the internet was responding to it and with what protocols. So Mr. Lindell, that's the basis of a PCAP. Mr. Lindell basically and his team never actually displayed these alleged PCAP files to the audience. We never saw them. I was waiting for that. They kept talking about these PCAP files and they're going to put them out there and this is going to be awesome. And here it is. And I'm like, yes, let's do this. I want a copy of this. I want to forensically examine what this is, even though I don't necessarily know the chain of custody. Now, what we got instead was a demo or a demonstration on basically the packet capture software Wireshark, which is a free utility. I don't think they mentioned Wireshark by name. I don't remember hearing Wireshark, but as soon as I saw Wireshark, I knew it. Everybody uses it, and myself included. I think every computer I have has Wireshark on it. Now, basically, they did a demo of this to say, hey, this is what a packet capture looks like. And that's all well and good, but that's not evidence. And as a response on Twitter, I ran a quick Wireshark packet capture on my own network here and posted an image. You can go see it on Twitter, and you can see a couple of my computers or my devices hitting Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and all of that. But that's about it. That's all it's really going to show me. It's not going to show me, or show you rather, what I posted on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter, because I am connecting to those sites using what's known as TLS encryption. So it's encrypted through the network, but you can definitely see that I went there and that it phoned me back. So I like demos. I really do. I enjoy them, but I'll say again, a demo is not evidence. I can show you, or I can teach you how to rob a bank, but that doesn't mean the bank was actually robbed. They're two different things. A demo is not evidence. Now, honestly, outside of the other discussions on day one, that was the only real cybersecurity anything that happened that day. Also, an algorithm expert, quote unquote, explained how a voter scam would work, basically algorithmically, but again, a demo is not evidence. And that's what we got on day one. So when they winded down, I wrote this on Twitter, and I quote, minus the hashtags, Mike Lindell at the Cybersymposium shutting down for evening. I literally watched all day, and from a forensics court evidence perspective, as a professional in cybersecurity, I can say I saw zero evidence that would hold up in court. Disappointing from the cyber perspective. Again, I'm a cyber nerd. I want to see the evidence. I want to look at this. I find this to be very interesting as part of my day job. Now, day two, and much of this is taken right from my tweets again, so forgive me if I stumble on this, but I started out with this. Basically, first expert this morning at the Cybersymposium is a former state senator that has a Microsoft small business certification and mentioned he's built a few networks in his day, quote unquote. That's a fine certification to have as IT, but IT is not cybersecurity or forensics. And to his credit, he actually said he wasn't an expert. But then why is he talking about this? So there you go. Now, the small business network expert explained chain of custody fairly well as it relates to voting, meaning how we are watching the votes and making sure the chain of custody of the actual voting, is secure, and also explained how you would break that. That was a pretty solid explanation of that. Again, demos aren't evidence, though. Explanations aren't evidence. I can explain how to rob a bank, doesn't mean the bank was robbed. Now, he mentioned that the entire chain was broken in the election and that the states have evidence and affidavits of this. And okay, show us this. I want to see the evidence. Don't tell me you have the evidence without showing that. And if you have the evidence, make it available to the rest of us. I want to see if it would hold up to the standards of chain of custody verification. It shows actually what you say it shows. Could I go to court with this, and could I testify as an expert for your side that it's actually legitimate? But we didn't see any of that. Then we came to the main event of the day, and this is taken right from my tweets once again. And I will go off on a little bit of a tangent to explain some of this, because tweets, you don't have a lot of characters to work with. Now, let's go. Okay. Here is a serious problem from the Cybersymposium claim of evidence, and hear me out here. The first speaker basically walked the audience through why the chain of custody is beyond important for voting. We just talked about that. To continue, that if the chain is broken, we can have fraud in an election. He's right about that. However, chain of custody for any evidence is beyond important, as it helps verify the evidence as legitimate, including evidence of election fraud. The first speaker also primed the audience that we'd see the evidence live shortly, as Ron Watkins, you might know him as Code Monkey, and also Ron Watkins, many speculate, and an HBO documentary said this as well, that Ron Watkins started the entire QAnon thing, that he was actually Q. Take that for what it's will. I'm not going to get into that. That's not what this is here. But Ron Watkins would spend hours with us sifting through the evidence to show us how the voting machines were hit. This is essentially what we were promised by the first speaker. Now, they mentioned that Mr. Watkins had not seen this data prior, so this would be a live dissection of the forensic evidence. This is great. This is what I've been waiting for to review in depth. This is day 2 now. Now, after numerous technical difficulties, Mr. Watkins is via video conference introduced, and right out of the gate, He states that the data he will be working on is allegedly 2 forensic images from a Dominion server. These images are before and after a software update that quote unquote prove the server was manipulated to change votes. Here's the thing. Immediately, they broke the cardinal rule: verify the chain of custody. They literally pounded chain of custody into the audience before that and then promptly forgot it when it actually came to the evidence that Mr. Watkins, Ron Watkins, was going to be dissecting. Mr. Watkins repeated the word allegedly multiple times and said that he was quote unquote told that the first forensic image was from 2019. So there's no verifiable chain of custody. Again, a massive chain of custody violation. I can create forensic images. I just talked about that. It's not hard to do. Anyone, though, could have mocked these up to look like anything. They also stated these were found publicly and would basically be giving out a link. So I was going to take a look. That link, for the record, never came. I'm still waiting for that. But if they were found publicly, then who knows? And I say, and I quote my tweet directly, "For all we know, these images are part of an actual disinformation campaign from a foreign government. Maybe they're legit. Without that understanding, it's 100% suspect and cannot be trusted." Now, objectively, this cannot hold up in court. Imagine fabricating evidence of a crime and then the legal system doesn't verify it's authentic. That's essentially what we are talking about here, and that's obviously a huge, huge issue. Now, the rest of day 2 and all of day 3 were more demos and discussions, oftentimes of the political nature. There was no direct evidence that cybersecurity experts like myself that we wanted could examine as presented. Now, on top of this, cybersecurity expert Robert Graham was also there live, and he was also tweeting about this. I was watching it. He was actually physically there, and he confirmed that third-party experts that were invited to this by either Mike Lindell or his organization, they received no data either. So I didn't see it on screen. Mr. Graham didn't get it in person, and no links to download were sent for us to review those PCAP files that they claimed they had that proved evidence of this, or the server images. And that doesn't, again, presuppose we don't know the chain of custody. We don't have a verification of where those PCAP files are. I can make a PCAP file right now. I can set this machine to go start talking to IP addresses on any country in the planet and run a packet capture, and it will show that this computer here actually talked to China or wherever. You put a satellite on the moon, I can probably talk to that and get a capture of that. That's what we're talking about here. So in the end, I saw no verifiable evidence presented. I didn't see any evidence at all. Not even just verifiable. I didn't see any evidence. I saw a lot of demonstrations, and that's about it. And from a nerd perspective, I'm just really interested in analyzing this kind of data, I was actually really bummed out by that. Again, I'm not adjudicating saying I hope the election was fraudulent or not. I'm not saying that. I just want to see the data. That's the only thing I'm doing and approaching this here. And other things happened too, during this, including a lot of technical difficulties that I thought was really interesting. They were blaming those on quote unquote hacker attacks. And yes, that is absolutely possible. But before we cybersecurity professionals go declaring data breaches and attacks, we consider it an incident. We investigate to identify and contain the threat, as well as gather evidence of confirmation. I'd love to see the evidence on that as well. If that is what they are saying, there you go. I would love to see that evidence too. I'm not actually really doubting them on that. It's very possible. But without evidence, I can't verify that, so I can't hold it up in court. And so that was it. Did this conference persuade me that Mike Lindell's claims that he had evidence that China hacked the 2020 election? No, without verifiable evidence presented to me to analyze, or anybody of my ilk like Robert Graham, who was actually there, and other cybersecurity professionals that were watching, the answer has to be no. Nothing would stand up in court that I saw. And again, I can do a demonstration in court to basically show you how I got verifiable evidence or what that verifiable evidence does, but it's not the same thing as having verifiable evidence. I will say this though, what Mr. Lindell and his speakers did though, and this is to their credit, they did educate whoever was watching on what chain of custody actually is and why it's important. And they also underscored a problem that we have known about for years, which is that many voting systems are vulnerable to exploitation. That is true. I'm glad that the public got an understanding of the chain of custody. I'm also glad that we are bringing to light a serious problem that I've been talking about for years as well, which is voting machine vulnerability. However, it's important to note that vulnerability doesn't equal exploitation. And so think about it this way. I can leave my car unlocked outside all night long, but that doesn't mean somebody actually opened my car door and sat in my car. I need proof that that happened with verifiable evidence. And that is essentially it. That is your analysis of the entire Mike Lindell thing. It took 20 minutes or so, which I think was a lot quicker than I thought I was going to be here, but that is your news of the day. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this informative, because that is the cybersecurity perspective of the Cybersymposium by Mike Lindell. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.